Welcome back, everyone, to Prescribed Vibes. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sierra. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we give you real conversations, real insights, and practical ways to understand yourself on a deeper level.
Yes, and today we're diving into a big one, trauma.
Yep, and we already know trauma is not something we're going to be able to fit into one episode. There's a lot to cover here. Trauma is something Steph and I both are very passionate about, we specialize in, so we're going to have a lot to say, I'm sure.
Yes, so this is going to be part one, and we're really going to focus on understanding trauma, and then eventually we will get into more details on part two.
Yeah, we're going to get into healing and tools and what to actually do with all this information about trauma in part two. So today is going to be about understanding and a little bit of psychoeducation around trauma. And then next time we'll give you guys some practical tools and what to do to address said trauma.
So, what is trauma? I think one of the biggest misconceptions about trauma is that people think, well, if I didn't go through something extreme, then I don't have trauma. If it's not something that severely impacted me or was disturbing, then I didn't really have any trauma. But in reality is that we've all gone through trauma.
Definitely. No one gets through life without trauma. And this is something that happens a lot in therapy. We ask clients, have you experienced any trauma? And people think trauma has to be something big and obvious and major, like abuse or a major accident or something along those lines. And so it's almost this like uncertainty, this I don't know if my experiences qualify, so I don't get to say that I've experienced trauma, almost is what it feels like. And so there is a lot of education that we do around what trauma is.
And I've had the same with a lot of clients just come in, like, no, everything was fine. I had a perfect childhood. Everything was great. But trauma is not defined by an event, it's defined by how your nervous system experienced it. And that's why so many times in our previous episodes, we've talked about feelings and our nervous system, because it really comes down to how does your nervous system experience an event?
Yeah, exactly. Trauma is less about what happened and more about how it impacted you. I used to have a sticky note on my desk years ago when I was first getting EMDR certified and getting into trauma, and it had a definition that I wish I could pull up verbatim, but it was essentially something around a life experience or event that has a lasting emotional impact on you. And one way that we measure it is how much distress you experience when you recall something that happened to you in your life.
I like how you said measure, because two people can go through the exact same situation and one person may feel deeply impacted and the other person is just indifferent, didn't even notice it maybe. So there's definitely a range, and I wouldn't say make comparisons with others. Just know that everyone is different. What may impact you doesn't necessarily mean may impact someone else, and that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Trauma is subjective, and that doesn't mean one person is stronger or weaker. It just means that they experienced it and processed it or didn't process it differently. And so comparison is definitely not helpful. I love telling people it's none of our business. It's none of our business what someone else thought about it, how it affected them, what they think. What do you think? What's your experience? And there is such a vast, I don't know, trauma is a spectrum, just like everything else, right? So
Mhm.
we're going to talk about the difference between what we call in therapy big T versus little t trauma.
So, to give you some examples, big T trauma would be things like physical abuse, sexual abuse, life threatening events.
And little t trauma is what most people are overlooking and not really clocking as a traumatic experience in their life.
And I found this is when people and clients have been like, no, everything, yeah, I didn't really experience any trauma. But Little t can look like emotional neglect, feeling unseen growing up, not feeling safe to express yourself, chronic criticism, and before you know it, that really adds up.
Yeah, or even just growing up in a household where your emotional needs weren't met consistently. We've talked a lot about attachment in this podcast, and attachment trauma is another one of my focus areas. And that is experienced through our emotional needs not being met consistently that creates trauma. And when we talk about like a post-traumatic stress disorder and things along those lines, where that's related to the big T trauma, there's another diagnosis called complex PTSD, which is more this repetitious little t trauma regarding our emotional needs, or those like micro experiences or experiences that are happening over a long period of time.
Exactly. And, here's the important part. Like you said, the little t trauma can be just as impactful of big T trauma because it just happens over and over and doesn't get resolved or processed. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's not always about intensity, it's about repetition, right? I have this image that comes to mind. I heard it or saw it somewhere. I'm always bad at remembering those things, but you dump a bucket of water on a rock, it's not going to do anything to the rock, right? But you have one drop of water repeatedly fall on this rock over time, and it's going to put a hole in that thing. The repetition, I mean, that's where our neural networks with that repetition are really letting those experiences and those ideas, the perspectives that we take from them, really sink in and become concrete in our psyche. And so a big event can absolutely do that, but these small events over and over again do in a very meaningful way as well.
And what we're also going to talk about is we've talked about this before. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And really, trauma lives in the body. We've talked about different modalities such as EMDR therapy and somatic therapy. But some people don't realize that trauma isn't just something that you remember.
It's something that your body holds on to, and there's so many different ways that we can experience the recollection or the impacts of that trauma.
So even if you logically or intellectually know you're feeling safe, you're fine, your body might still react like you're not. Your body has not caught up with your brain.
Yep. And that's where we see things like anxiety, shutting down, overreacting, or even just kind of disconnecting and feeling numb. Again, it's subjective. The way that we respond to it's going to look different across the board too.
And you may even hear people say things like, I don't know why I'm like this. And it's fair, it's valid not knowing, right? Because your body or your mind just learns to avoid or deflect and push it away. And then before you know it, you're just not aware, you're not understanding why you're a certain way.
Yeah, and I don't know if this makes me a toxic therapist or a good one, but I get so excited. I'm like, oh, you don't know why you're like this? Let me tell you. We're going to learn something today because your nervous system is doing exactly what it learned to do to protect you.
I really like that. Yes, just explaining it and helping people just be educated in what's going on. So, how does trauma show up? Real life signs. That's what we're going to talk about, how it shows up because it's really not always obvious.
Yeah, it's not always these flashbacks or panic attacks that we commonly associate the idea of trauma with. And maybe that's where some of the misconception comes along as well, where it's like, oh, well, I'm not a war veteran who's experiencing, fireworks on the 4th of July and having flashbacks and panic attacks and I can't function. So I don't have trauma. That's not what I'm experiencing. It can look like tons of different things.
And some of those things, so some real life signs can look like overthinking everything, needing control, people pleasing, fear of abandonment, difficulty trusting, shutting down in conflict. I'm sure a lot of those sound familiar, but those are some real life examples.
Right. Or even kind of the opposite of some of those things, being overly independent and feeling like we can't rely on anyone.
Avoiding attachment. And a big one we see is emotional reactivity, feeling like your reactions don't match the situation.
Yeah, and that's not usually about what's happening in the present moment. It's about something older being activated. And so we'll talk about like, don't cry over spilled milk, right? Like, okay, it's not really about the milk that's spilled. That's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Or it feels like an easier outlet for some of these other things I'm not allowing myself to feel or react to. It comes out in ways that feel safe to us when we need to address the bigger picture. So let's clear up a few myths around trauma.
One of them could sound like, I should be over it by now. And that's not very fair, but that is an example.
Not us shooting all over ourselves. We talked about that before. Healing doesn't follow a timeline. Your nervous system does not care how much time has passed. It wants to make sense of these experiences and decide whether that information is useful in keeping us safe or not moving forward. So if we haven't kind of processed through that backlog of files and sorted it away into threat, not threat, safe, not safe, then it's going to pick up on any kind of cue around to say, oh, can we use this information to make sense of that and decide whether we're safe or not related to this thing? So it's a constant scanning and vigilance of our brain to try to feel safe and make sense of things.
With that said, another myth can sound like, it wasn't that bad. How often do you hear that?
Yeah, everyone's out here minimizing their experiences and, oh, it wasn't that bad. It's fine. Other people had it worse, right? The idea of, uh, I can't, a lot of times it's protective in its own way too. Like, if I acknowledge that this was terrible, I'm not going to be okay.
Absolutely. I've been guilty of that. Like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It's just really minimizing, you said, protecting ourselves from wanting to feel too much, or what accountability or what steps will I have to take if I acknowledge how hurtful or how much it really did impact me.
It's not a competition, right? Again, it's subjective. We can have the same exact experience and yet experience it differently, be impacted by it differently. You heard the term, if we go into pop culture and TikTok therapy, trauma Olympics. Have you heard that?
Yes.
This is not the trauma Olympics. We are not comparing. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter how much you tell yourself, oh, someone else had it worse, or it could have been worse, or that doesn't change the fact that you had that experience and you feel the way that you feel.
Exactly. Pain is not a competition.
So if you're listening to this and you're recognizing some of these patterns in yourself,
You are not broken.
your nervous system adapted. Our brain is always, always, always doing what it can to keep us safe.
And those adaptations probably helped you survive at some point.
But the reality is they're probably not serving you anymore. They did at one point. Not today, not in this, current stage of life or circumstance that we're in. One of my, me and my analogies. One that I heard a while back was like living underwater and having, an oxygen tank and all of those things to be able to breathe and survive and live underwater. And then you walk up on land and you keep all of that stuff on. You don't need it anymore. It's heavy. The oxygen's probably getting low in your tank anyway. There's plenty of fresh air to breathe around here. Take that stuff off. Make life a little bit easier for yourself to do something that's more efficient and effective.
Yeah, and that's what it's all about, right? Is learning more about yourself and what tools are out there that you can use, and learning about what, some of us don't know what we don't know. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to say it. Therapy is very helpful for that. So consider it if you're not in therapy. And we hope that what we've talked about so far laid some of the groundwork. In part two, we are going to talk about what to actually do with this, what we've talked about.
Yeah, we're going to get into how to start healing, regulating your nervous system, making sense of our experiences, which I'm not sorry, therapy is helpful with. Sometimes we need someone to help us lay it all out and derive meaning and understanding from those experiences. We're too close to the situation. And so having a partner in that, a guide, and sometimes that can be our friends and our peers if they're well enough equipped to do that. But therapy is generally going to be the best place to do that kind of work. And so making sense of those experiences and that information and filing it away and shifting some of those patterns, learning how to cope with it.
And speaking of therapy, awareness is the first step.
It's just the first step, but it is not the last. We got to be aware in order to make those changes, but we also got to be willing and ready to do some of the hard work. We're not going to kid you guys and say that trauma work is easy stuff. If it were easy, everyone would do it, right?
Exactly. It's not easy, and you don't just get magically healed after a few sessions. So, we really thank you guys, everyone, for listening to this episode. We really hope you learned a little bit about trauma. We're going to get into this a lot more in part two, but please provide us with any feedback or questions that you have.
Yeah, definitely. That can help us expand on whatever you guys are interested in hearing more about or learning more about in the part two episode on this. We could probably talk about this for several episodes, so help us narrow it down and let us know what you want to hear.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure this episode wasn't overwhelming or sounding too clinical, and make sure it's something easily to listen to and digest. But please let us know if you want us to make any tweaks or add anything to future episodes.
Thanks again for joining us. Today's vibes are prescribed as trauma informed.
Trauma informed. Yes, I like that.
All right, we will see you guys in part two of trauma. Don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, rate, review, all that stuff. We need as much visibility as we can get. We're just still a little baby podcast. So if you enjoy listening to us, please, please spread the word. Do what you can to help us reach more people. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. And we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.